The marble floors of the Daniel Patrick Moynihan United States Courthouse gleamed under the fluorescent lights, reflecting the grandeur of federal justice in Lower Manhattan. At 11:15 on a Thursday night in September, the 15th floor was silent except for the distant hum of the ventilation system and the occasional squeak of a cleaning cart's wheels. Judge Margaret Thompson stood at the window of her chambers, looking out at the illuminated skyline of New York City. The Empire State Building glowed purple in the distance, and streams of yellow taxi lights moved like arteries through the dark streets below. From up here, the city looked beautiful, orderly, manageable. Nothing like the chaos inside her own life. Margaret was 42 years old. With shoulder-length blonde hair she kept meticulously styled, sharp blue eyes that had intimidated countless attorneys, and a reputation for being utterly unshakable. They called her the Iron Judge, never the first to arrive at a verdict, but always the most certain. In 12 years on the federal bench, she had never shown weakness, never wavered, never let anyone see behind the carefully constructed facade. Tonight, she was about to break that streak. She touched her fingers to the window glass, feeling its coolness. Her wedding ring, she still wore it, though the divorce had been finalized 23 months ago, caught the light. Richard had kept the house in Connecticut. Their daughter, Emily, now 20 years old and in her junior year at Columbia, had chosen to live with him. "You're never there anyway, Mom," she'd said during one of their rare phone calls. "You're married to your work." Margaret closed her eyes against the sting of that memory. The custody arrangement had been brutal in its simplicity. Emily was an adult, free to choose. And she had chosen her father, the warm parent, the one who came to recitals and remembered birthdays, over the judge who was always in court, always preparing for the next case, always hiding. Margaret gathered her briefcase and the stack of briefs she needed to review for tomorrow's docket. She changed out of her judicial robe, hanging it carefully on the wooden valet stand, and smoothed down her white silk blouse and gray pencil skirt. Everything had to be perfect. Everything always had to be perfect. She locked her chambers and walked down the corridor, her heels clicking on marble. The building was almost empty now, just security guards on the ground floor, and the night cleaning crew working their way up through the floors. Margaret had a routine on Tuesdays and Thursdays. After everyone left, after the building settled into its nighttime silence, she would go to the executive bathroom on the 15th floor, the one that was rarely used, tucked away near the emergency stairwell. She would lock herself in, and for just 15 or 20 minutes, she would allow herself to stop being Judge Thompson. She would allow herself to be Margaret, just Margaret, the woman who was tired, lonely, and desperately sad. Tonight was Thursday. Margaret pushed open the bathroom door. The space was luxurious in that cold, corporate way. White Carrara marble everywhere, modern chrome fixtures, perfect lighting designed to make everyone look professional and composed. She set her briefcase down by the door and looked at herself in the large mirror above the sinks. Judge Margaret Thompson stared back at her, hair perfect, makeup flawless, expression controlled, but her hands were shaking. She gripped the edge of the marble counter, feeling the cool stone under her palms. Then, slowly, she slid down to sit on the floor, her back against the wall beneath the paper towel dispenser. She pulled her knees up slightly, wrapped her arms around them, and finally, let the tears come. They came in silent sobs at first, her shoulders shaking. Then, as the dam broke completely, she buried her face in her hands and cried in a way she hadn't allowed herself to cry in public spaces, even empty ones, for decades. She cried for her failed marriage, for the daughter who wouldn't speak to her, for the loneliness that had become her constant companion, for all the years she'd spent being someone she wasn't, living a life that checked all the right boxes, but felt hollow at its core. She cried because she was 42 years old and had only recently begun to understand why her marriage felt like a performance, why she'd always felt like she was acting a role, why she'd wake up some mornings with a nameless longing she couldn't explain or satisfy. She cried because the truth was terrifying, and she had no idea what to do with it. Margaret didn't hear the bathroom door open. She didn't hear the soft footsteps or the careful placement of a mop against the wall. She only became aware she wasn't alone when a gentle voice, slightly accented, said quietly, "Judge Thompson?" Margaret's head snapped up, horror flooding through her. Through her tear-blurred vision, she saw a woman in a navy blue maintenance uniform standing a few feet away, concern evident on her face. Rosa Morales had been cleaning the courthouse for 7 years. She knew every judge, every clerk, every attorney who worked late, and she'd noticed over the past few months a pattern. Every Tuesday and Thursday night, the light in this particular bathroom would be on long after everyone left, and sometimes, if she listened carefully while cleaning the adjacent hallway, she could hear something that sounded like crying. Tonight, she decided she couldn't ignore it anymore. "I'm sorry," Rosa said softly, not moving closer, but not leaving either. "I heard. Are you okay?" Margaret scrambled to stand up, her professional mask desperately trying to reassemble itself. "I'm fine. I was just—" Her voice broke. She wiped at her face with the back of her hand, smearing her makeup. "I'm fine. You should go." But Rosa didn't move. She looked at the powerful judge sitting on the bathroom floor, mascara running down her face, hands trembling, and she saw something she recognized intimately. Fear. Loneliness. The exhaustion of hiding. "Judge Thompson," Rosa said gently, "I've worked here for 7 years. I've seen a lot of people crying in bathrooms. Usually they're law clerks stressed about deadlines, or lawyers who lost a case." She paused, then added softly, "But you come here on purpose, to cry alone where no one will see." Margaret stared at her, unable to speak. Rosa took a small step closer. "I know because I used to do the same thing. Different bathroom, different building, but same reason." She met Margaret's eyes directly. "I know what it's like to hide who you are." The words hung in the air between them. Margaret felt something crack open in her chest, something she'd kept locked away for so long. "You... what?" Rosa hesitated, then made a decision. She moved to sit on the floor across from Margaret, her back against the opposite wall, maintaining a respectful distance but offering solidarity through her presence. "I know what it's like to be scared," Rosa said quietly. "Scared that if people knew the truth about you, you'd lose everything. Your job, your family, your place in the world." She looked down at her hands. "I know what it's like to cry alone because you think you're the only one." Margaret's breath caught. "How did you—" "I recognized it," Rosa said simply. "The way you hold yourself, the way you're so controlled all the time. The way you come here late at night when you think no one will see." She looked up, her dark eyes kind. "I've been there. Actually, I'm still there in a lot of ways." For a long moment, neither woman spoke. The fluorescent lights hummed above them. Somewhere in the building, a door closed with a distant echo. "I'm Rosa," the cleaning woman said, even though her name tag clearly displayed it. "Rosa Morales. Margaret," the judge whispered, and it was the first time in years she'd introduced herself with just her first name, without the title, without the armor. "Nice to meet you, Margaret," Rosa said with a gentle smile. And somehow, sitting on the cold marble floor of an empty courthouse bathroom at nearly midnight, Margaret Thompson felt something she hadn't felt in years, seen. If this story is already touching your heart, stay with us. Subscribe to the channel to see how Margaret and Rosa's connection develops. Rosa glanced at the door, then back at Margaret. "Do you want me to leave you alone? Or would company be okay?" Margaret surprised herself by saying, "Company would be okay." They sat in silence for a few minutes, and strangely it wasn't uncomfortable. It was the first time Margaret could remember sitting in silence with another person, without feeling the need to perform, to say the right thing, to maintain the proper image. "How old is your son?" Margaret asked suddenly, remembering having seen Rosa with a teenage boy once in the courthouse lobby. Rosa looked surprised that Margaret knew she had a son. "Miguel just turned 16. He's a good kid. Getting good grades. Wants to go to college." Pride filled her voice, then a shadow crossed her face. "His father, my ex-husband, doesn't know about me, about who I really am. Does your son know?" "No." Rosa's voice was barely a whisper. "I'm terrified of telling him. What if he hates me? What if he's ashamed?" Margaret understood that fear intimately. "My daughter, Emily, she's 20. We barely speak anymore. She swallowed hard. After the divorce,
She said I was never really there
anyway. Were you hiding from her too? Rosa asked gently. Or from yourself? The question pierced through Margaret's defenses. Both, I think. I threw myself into work because it was easier than facing what I'd been running from for 20 years. What were you running from? Margaret closed her eyes. She'd never said it out loud. Not to her therapist, not to her ex-husband, not even to herself in the mirror. But here, in this bathroom, with this stranger who somehow understood, the words finally came. From the truth that my marriage was a lie. That I was never really in love with Richard, not the way a wife should be. That I've been attracted to women since I was a teenager. But I was so scared of what that meant that I buried it. Married a good man, had a child, built a career, and tried to convince myself that was enough. Tears streamed down her face again. I wasted 20 years of my life being someone I'm not, and now my daughter won't speak to me, and I'm 42 years old, and I don't know how to be myself. Rosa listened without judgment, without shock, without the disgust or dismissal Margaret had always feared would greet such a confession. You're not alone, Rosa said after a moment. I came out to myself 5 years ago. I'm 38. I married young. Had Miguel at 22. His father is a good man. But I was never happy. Not really. When we divorced, I told him it was because we'd grown apart. I didn't tell him it was because I'd finally admitted to myself that I'm a lesbian. The word hung in the air. Margaret had never heard anyone say it so matter-of-factly, so unashamedly. I've never said that word about myself, Margaret whispered. Lesbian. I've never said it out loud. You don't have to, Rosa assured her. Not until you're ready. And maybe not to me at all. But Margaret, hiding like this, crying alone in bathroom, it's killing you. I can see it. I can't come out, Margaret said urgently, panic rising. Do you understand what that would mean? I'm a federal judge. There are already so few women on the bench. If people knew if they knew, it would overshadow everything. Every decision I make would be questioned. Every case would become about my personal life instead of the law. Is that really true? Rosa asked carefully. Or is that the fear talking? Margaret started to argue, then stopped. She didn't know anymore. The fear had been in charge for so long that she couldn't separate realistic concerns from internalized panic. What about you? Margaret asked, deflecting. Why haven't you told your son? Rosa's expression became pained. Because I'm scared I'll lose him. He's all I have. His father has family, support. I'm just a courthouse janitor. If Miguel rejected me, she couldn't finish the sentence. They sat with their shared fears, two women from completely different worlds, connected by the weight of secrets and the exhaustion of hiding. I should let you finish your work, Margaret said finally, starting to stand. Wait. Rosa pulled a small notepad from her uniform pocket and scribbled something on it. She tore off the page and held it out. My phone number. Just if you ever need someone who understands. Who knows? You don't have to use it. But if you want to, it's there. Margaret took the paper, staring at the numbers written in neat handwriting. Thank you, she whispered. And Judge, Margaret, Rosa corrected herself. You're not wasting your life. You're 42, not 82. There's still time to live authentically. There's still time to be happy. Margaret clutched the paper in her hand. Is that what you tell yourself? Rosa smiled sadly. I'm working on believing it. They both stood. Margaret picked up her briefcase, acutely aware of the mess her face must be. Rosa retrieved her mop from where she'd leaned it against the wall. Tuesday and Thursday nights, Rosa said. If you need to talk. I'm usually cleaning this floor around 11. Margaret nodded, not trusting herself to speak. She left the bathroom and walked to the elevator, her mind reeling. In her pocket, she carried Rosa Morales' phone number. In her chest, she carried something she hadn't felt in years, the fragile beginning of hope. The weekend passed in a blur of loneliness and introspection. Margaret sat in her Upper West Side apartment, a sleek, modern space that felt more like a hotel than a home, and stared at the piece of paper with Rosa's number on it. She must have picked it up and set it down 50 times. On Saturday, She tried to call Emily. "Hi, this is Emily. Leave a message." "Hi, sweetheart. It's Mom. I wanted to see how you're doing. How are your classes going? Maybe we could get dinner sometime this week? Call me back when you can. I love you." Emily didn't call back. On Sunday, Margaret went to the gym, bought groceries she wouldn't eat, and reviewed case files until her eyes burned. Normal routines. Safe routines. But Rosa's words kept echoing in her head. There's still time to live authentically. There's still time to be happy. Was there? Margaret didn't even know what authentic looked like for her anymore. Tuesday night arrived. Margaret finished her last hearing at 6:30, spent 3 hours in her chambers reviewing motions, and by 10:15, she was alone on the 15th floor again. She told herself she was just following her usual routine, that it had nothing to do with Rosa mentioning Tuesday nights. But at 11 o'clock, Margaret found herself walking toward that same bathroom. She pushed open the door, half expecting it to be empty, half hoping it wouldn't be. Rosa was there, cleaning the mirrors with careful attention to detail. When she saw Margaret in the reflection, she smiled. "Hi." "Hi," Margaret replied, feeling suddenly awkward. I wasn't crying tonight. You just wanted company?" Rosa suggested gently. "Maybe. Is that weird?" "Not at all." Rosa set down her cleaning spray. "I'm almost done here. Want to sit for a few minutes?" They settled into what was apparently becoming their spots, Margaret by the paper towel dispenser, Rosa against the opposite wall. It should have felt strange, a federal judge and a janitor sitting on a bathroom floor, but somehow it just felt right. "How was your weekend?" Rosa asked. "Quiet. I tried calling my daughter. She didn't call back." Margaret's voice was matter-of-fact, but the hurt underneath was evident. "I'm sorry." "How about you?" Rosa leaned her head back against the wall. "Miguel had a soccer game on Saturday. They won. He was so happy." Her smile was proud and sad at the same time. "Sometimes I look at him and think about how much I'm keeping from him, how many parts of myself he doesn't know." "Do you think he suspects?" "Maybe. He's a smart kid. I've never dated anyone since the divorce. He's asked me why a few times." Rosa paused. "I tell him I'm too busy. That work takes all my time. He believes me because he wants to believe me." Margaret understood that completely. It's easier when they don't ask questions. Easier, but lonelier, Rosa observed. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment. Then Margaret surprised herself by asking, "Have you ever been with anyone since you realized?" Rosa's expression became wistful. "Once. 2 years ago. I met a woman at a community center in Queens where I take English classes. We dated for 3 months. It was wonderful and terrifying at the same time." She smiled at the memory, but she wanted more than I could give. She wanted to meet my son, to be part of my life. I got scared and ended it. Do you regret it? Every day. But I'm also not sure I would have done differently. Fear is a powerful thing. Margaret nodded slowly. I've never, with a woman. I've thought about it, imagined it, but I've never had the courage. There's no timeline for courage, Rosa said kindly. You're exactly where you need to be right now. On a bathroom floor at 11 o'clock at night? Rosa laughed, a warm, genuine sound that made Margaret smile. Hey, I've had breakthrough moments in weirder places. They talked for another 30 minutes about nothing particularly deep. Rosa's English classes, Margaret's frustration with a particularly stubborn attorney, the best pizza places in the city, whether autumn or spring was the better season. Simple conversation that felt profound, precisely because it was so normal. When they finally stood to leave, Rosa said, "Same time Thursday?" Margaret hesitated only a second. Same time Thursday. Thursday came, and the following Tuesday, and Thursday again. Over the next 3 weeks, these late-night conversations became the anchor point of Margaret's life. She found herself looking forward to Tuesdays and Thursdays with an anticipation she hadn't felt about anything in years. She started staying later at the courthouse, finding excuses to still be there when Rosa's shift brought her to the 15th floor. They shared more of themselves in those stolen hours. Rosa talked about growing up in Texas, about her parents who didn't understand why she'd moved to New York, about her dreams of maybe one day opening her own small business, a cafe perhaps, or a bookstore. Margaret shared stories about law school, about the first case she'd ever tried, about her mother who passed away when Emily was a baby. They didn't always talk about being gay, about hiding, about fear. But it was always there, the shared understanding that colored everything else they said. "I looked up your cases," Rosa admitted one Thursday in October. "Online. There was an article about you, about how you're one of the youngest federal judges appointed in the last decade, and how your rulings on civil rights cases have been really influential." Margaret felt her cheeks warm with an unfamiliar pleasure at Rosa's interest. "You didn't have to do that. I wanted to. You're impressive, Margaret. Really impressive. I'm just doing my job." "No," Rosa said firmly. "You're doing it exceptionally well. Don't downplay that." Margaret looked at Rosa, really looked at her. She was beautiful in a way Margaret hadn't let herself fully acknowledge before. Warm brown eyes that crinkled when she smiled, dark hair that fell in soft waves when she took it out of the ponytail she wore for work, strong hands that moved with graceful efficiency, a kindness that radiated from her very presence, and Margaret felt something she'd been trying not to feel: attraction. This connection is growing deeper. "Stay with us and subscribe to see where this journey leads." "Rosa," Margaret said hesitantly, "can I ask you something?" "Always." "How did you know?" "About yourself. How did you finally accept it?" Rosa considered the question carefully. "There wasn't one moment. It was more like, I stopped fighting against what I'd always known deep down. I stopped making excuses for why I wasn't happy with my husband. I stopped pretending that the way I felt about women was just admiration or friendship." She met Margaret's eyes. "I finally let myself feel what I'd been suppressing for years. And once I did, I couldn't go back to pretending." "Were you scared?" "Terrified. Still am, in a lot of ways. But you know what's scarier? Getting to the end of my life and realizing I never really lived it, that I spent all those years hiding from my own truth." Margaret absorbed this. "I think I'm scared of both, scared of hiding forever, but also scared of what happens if I stop hiding." "That's why we do it in small steps," Rosa said gently. "You don't have to come out to the world tomorrow. You just have to be honest with yourself today. And then maybe tomorrow you take one more small step, and then another." "What was your first small step?" Rosa smiled. "Saying the words out loud. I'm a lesbian. Just to myself, in my apartment, when Miguel was at school. It sounds simple, but it was enormous." Margaret tried to imagine doing that. The words felt huge and frightening, but also true. "And what was the second step?" she asked. "Telling someone else. A friend from my English class. She's gay too, and I'd suspected but never asked. One day I just said it. I think I might be too. And she hugged me and said, 'Welcome to the family.'" Rosa's eyes glistened with the memory. "It was the first time I didn't feel completely alone." "You told me," Margaret said quietly, "that first night. You told me about yourself before I told you about me. I know, because I recognized something in you that I saw in myself, and I thought, maybe if I was brave enough to say it first, you'd feel safe enough to say it too." "That was incredibly generous." Rosa shrugged. "We have to help each other. No one else is going to do it for us." Margaret felt a surge of emotion she couldn't quite name. Gratitude, yes. Admiration. But also something more. Something that made her heart race and her palms sweat. "Rosa, Margaret started, then stopped, unsure what she wanted to say. "Yeah?" Rosa's voice was soft, her expression open. "I'm really glad you walked into that bathroom that night." Rosa's smile was like sunrise. "Me too." They sat in silence, but it was a different kind of silence now, charged with something unspoken, something that was growing between them whether they acknowledged it or not. Finally, Rosa glanced at her watch. "I should finish up. My supervisor sometimes checks on us after midnight." "Of course." Margaret stood, offering her hand to help Rosa up. Their fingers touched, and Margaret felt an electric jolt at the contact. Rosa must have felt it too because her eyes widened slightly. They stood there for a moment, hands still touching, before Rosa gently pulled away. "Thursday?" she asked, her voice a little breathless. "Thursday," Margaret confirmed. As Margaret rode the elevator down to the ground floor, she pressed her hand to her chest, feeling her heart hammering. This was dangerous. This feeling, this connection, this longing for someone she barely knew, but somehow understood completely. This was exactly what she'd been afraid of her entire life, and terrifyingly, wonderfully, she wasn't sure she wanted to run from it anymore. October gave way to November, and New York City transformed into its autumn glory. The trees in Central Park blazed with orange and gold, and the air turned crisp and cool. Margaret found herself taking walks during her lunch break, something she never used to do, just to clear her head and think about Rosa. Because Rosa was all she thought about now. Their Tuesday and Thursday meetings continued, but they'd expanded beyond the bathroom. Sometimes they'd grab coffee from the 24-hour deli across the street and sit on a bench in the small plaza outside the courthouse. Even though it meant Rosa was taking time from her cleaning rounds, they'd talk until Rosa had to go back inside, and Margaret would watch her walk away, feeling a mixture of longing and confusion. This was more than friendship. Margaret knew it. Rosa probably knew it too. But neither of them said it out loud, as if acknowledging it would make it real, would force them to make decisions they weren't ready to make. On a Tuesday night in mid-November, everything changed. Margaret was reviewing a particularly complex case in her chambers. A civil rights violation that had implications for dozens of similar cases nationwide. She'd been working on the opinion for weeks, and tonight she was stuck on a crucial section about precedent. Around 10:30, her office phone rang. Margaret frowned. Who would call her chambers this late? She picked up. Judge Thompson. Mom? Emily's voice was thick with tears. Margaret's heart stopped. Emily? Honey, what's wrong? Are you okay? I'm okay, Emily sobbed. I broke up with Josh, and I know I shouldn't call you because we haven't talked in weeks and you're probably busy. But I didn't know who else to call and... Emily, slow down. I'm here. I'm always here for you. Margaret gripped the phone. Tell me what happened. For the next 20 minutes, Emily poured out her heartbreak. Her boyfriend of 2 years had cheated on her. She'd found out through a friend. She felt stupid and used and didn't know what to do. Margaret listened, her maternal instincts overriding everything else. When Emily finally ran out of words, Margaret said gently, Sweetheart, you're not stupid. You trusted someone, and they betrayed that trust. That's on them, not you. But I should have seen the signs, Emily protested. He was distant, always on his phone, making excuses. Sometimes we don't see what we don't want to see, Margaret said, the words coming from deep personal experience. Sometimes we convince ourselves that everything is fine because facing the truth is too painful. Emily was quiet for a moment. That's what you did, wasn't it, with Dad? You pretended everything was fine until you couldn't anymore. Margaret's breath caught. They'd never talked about the divorce directly. Yes, she admitted. That's exactly what I did. Why, Mom? If you weren't happy, why did you stay so long? This was the moment. Margaret could deflect, could give a sanitized answer about growing apart and different life goals. Or she could take one of those small steps Rosa had talked about. She could tell her daughter a piece of the truth. Because I was scared, Margaret said quietly. Scared of what people would think, scared of disappointing everyone, scared of facing who I really was. Who are you really? Margaret closed her eyes. I'm still figuring that out, honey, but I'm trying to be braver about it, trying to be honest with myself for the first time in my life. I miss you, Mom, Emily whispered. Tears spilled down Margaret's face. I miss you too. So much. Can we get dinner sometime? Just us? I would love that. Anytime. Name the day. This Saturday? Saturday is perfect. They talked for a few more minutes, making plans. And when Margaret hung up, she sat in her office crying, but this time, they were tears of relief and hope. A soft knock on her door made her look up. Rosa stood in the doorway, concern on her face. I heard you on the phone, Rosa said. Is everything okay? Margaret wiped at her tears, then decided not to hide them. My daughter called. We're going to have dinner on Saturday. For the first time in months, Rosa's face lit up. Margaret, that's wonderful. She asked me why I stayed in my marriage so long. And I told her I was scared of facing who I really am. Margaret looked at Rosa. I've never said anything like that to her before. Rosa came into the office and closed the door behind her. That took courage. I learned it from someone who's been very brave herself, Margaret said meaningfully. They looked at each other across the office. The air felt thick with unspoken words. Rosa, I need to tell you something, Margaret said, her heart pounding. These past few weeks, talking with you, getting to know you, it's meant more to me than I know how to express. You've helped me see that maybe I don't have to hide forever, that maybe there's another way to live. You've helped me too, Rosa said softly. Talking with you reminds me that I'm not alone, that what I feel isn't wrong. Can I ask you something? Margaret stood up, walking around her desk but maintaining distance. That woman you dated 2 years ago, the one you broke up with because you were scared, do you think about her? Sometimes. Why? Because I'm trying to understand something. Margaret's voice trembled slightly. I'm trying to understand what it means that I think about you constantly, that I look forward to Tuesdays and Thursdays more than anything else in my week, that when I'm making decisions about my day, my first thought is, will this affect my time with Rosa? Rosa's eyes widened. Margaret. I don't know what I'm doing, Margaret continued. I've never done this before, never felt this before. Not really. Not like this. And I'm terrified because you work here, and I'm a judge, and there are power dynamics and complications and... Stop, Rosa said gently. She took a few steps closer. You're overthinking. Just tell me what you feel. Margaret took a shaky breath. I feel like I've been sleepwalking through my entire life, and you woke me up. I feel like I finally understand what people mean when they talk about connection. I feel like... She met Rosa's eyes. Like I'm falling for you, and I don't know how to stop, and I'm not sure I want to. The silence that followed was deafening. Margaret felt exposed, vulnerable, terrified that she'd just ruined the one genuine relationship she'd built in years. Then Rosa smiled, that beautiful, warm smile that made Margaret's heart skip. You know what's funny? I've been feeling the exact same way and telling myself I'm being ridiculous, that you're this brilliant federal judge, and I'm just a janitor, and you couldn't possibly— Don't, Margaret interrupted. Don't minimize yourself. You're not just anything. You're Rosa Morales, and you're kind and insightful and brave, and talking with you is the best part of my day. Rosa's eyes filled with tears. Really, really. They stood there, a few feet apart, the weight of their confessions hanging between them. Then Rosa said, What do we do now? I don't know, Margaret admitted. This is complicated. Because of your job? Because of everything. Because you work here. Because I'm still figuring out who I am. Because I have no idea how to navigate this. I've never even been on a date with a woman. Neither have I, Rosa said with a small laugh. Well, except for that one 3-month relationship. And I was terrified the whole time, so we're both disasters at this. Seems like it. They laughed, and the tension eased slightly. Then Rosa said, We don't have to figure everything out tonight. We can take it slow. One small step at a time, remember? What would the next small step be? Rosa thought for a moment. Maybe getting coffee somewhere that's not a courthouse bathroom or a 24-hour deli? Margaret felt a flutter of nervousness and excitement. Like a date? If you want to call it that. Or we could call it 2 friends grabbing coffee. Whatever feels less scary. I think calling it a date might be more honest, Margaret said, then added quickly, but somewhere private. Is that okay? I can't be public about this. Not yet. I understand, Rosa said. I'm not ready to be public either. My son doesn't even know I'm gay. So 2 terrified women sneaking around to have coffee, Margaret summarized. Sounds romantic when you put it that way, Rosa joked. They both laughed again, and Margaret felt something loosen in her chest. This didn't have to be dramatic or earth-shattering. It could just be 2 people who liked each other taking a small step. Sunday afternoon? Margaret suggested. There's a quiet cafe in Greenwich Village. Very low-key. Sunday afternoon, Rosa agreed. They stood there smiling at each other like teenagers, until Rosa finally said, "I should get back to work before my supervisor wonders where I disappeared to." "Of course." As Rosa turned to leave, Margaret said, "Rosa?" "Yeah, thank you. For being patient with me. For understanding why this is hard. We're doing this together," Rosa said. "Both of us scared. Both of us figuring it out. That's what makes it okay." After Rosa left, Margaret sat back down at her desk, but she couldn't focus on the case anymore. Her mind was spinning with what had just happened. She'd done it. She'd told someone, told Rosa, how she felt. And Rosa felt the same way. And now they had a date. Margaret pressed her hands to her face, feeling overwhelmed and exhilarated and terrified all at once. Sunday was 4 days away, 4 days to be nervous, to second-guess herself, to imagine all the ways this could go wrong. But also 4 days to feel something she'd never felt before. Anticipation. Hope. The beginning of something real. Margaret and Rosa are taking their first steps toward something beautiful. Subscribe to follow their journey. Saturday dinner with Emily was both wonderful and difficult. They met at a small Italian restaurant in the West Village, and for the first hour, they were awkward with each other, dancing around real conversation with safe topics like Emily's classes and Margaret's recent cases. But over tiramisu and coffee, Emily said, "Mom, can I ask you something personal?" Margaret braced herself. "Of course." "Are you seeing anyone?" The question caught Margaret off guard. No, not exactly. Why do you ask?" "Because you seem different, lighter somehow. Less heavy." Emily studied her mother's face. "It's a good different. I just wondered if maybe you'd met someone." Margaret's heart raced. This was her daughter. She could take another small step. "There is someone I've started spending time with. It's very new, very tentative. But yes, they make me feel lighter." Emily smiled. "That's great, Mom. You deserve to be happy. What's his name?" There it was. The moment. Margaret could correct the pronoun, could tell Emily the truth, or she could deflect, could let her daughter's assumption stand. "It's complicated," Margaret said carefully, "and very new. Can we talk about it more when I have more figured out myself?" Emily looked disappointed but nodded. "Okay. But Mom? Whoever they are, I hope they're good to you. You deserve that." "Thank you, sweetheart." They parted with a hug, and Emily promised to call more often. As Margaret walked home through the chilly November evening, she felt both relieved and guilty. She'd taken a step with Emily, but not the full step. Not yet. Sunday arrived with gray skies and a light drizzle. Margaret changed clothes 4 times before finally settling on dark jeans, a cream-colored sweater, and her favorite leather jacket. Casual, but put together, she looked at herself in the mirror and barely recognized the nervous woman staring back. The cafe Rosa had suggested, a tiny place called Brew Point, tucked on a quiet street in Greenwich Village, was perfect, small, cozy, with mismatched furniture and walls covered in local art. Only a handful of tables, and on this rainy Sunday afternoon, just a few customers scattered throughout. Rosa was already there, sitting at a corner table, and Margaret's breath caught when she saw her. Rosa wore jeans and a soft burgundy sweater, her hair down around her shoulders instead of in its usual work ponytail. She looked beautiful and nervous and real. "Hi," Margaret said, sliding into the chair across from her. "Hi." Rosa smiled. "You found it okay?" "GPS is a wonderful thing." Margaret ordered a cappuccino from the barista who came by, then turned her full attention to Rosa. "This is nice. The cafe, I mean." "I come here sometimes on Sundays," Rosa said. "It's quiet. No one really pays attention to anyone else." They sat in slightly awkward silence for a moment. Then they both tried to speak at once. "So, They laughed. "You first," Margaret said. Rosa took a breath. "I wanted to say thank you for suggesting this, for taking this step. I know it's scary for you. It's scary for both of us. Yeah, but I've had more practice being scared," Rosa said, with a self-deprecating smile. "You're new to this particular flavor of terror." Margaret laughed. "That's true. I'm a complete novice at sneaking around to have coffee with a woman I'm falling for." "Terror." Rosa's expression softened. You're falling for me? I thought I made that clear on Tuesday. You did. I like hearing it again. Well, I am, Margaret said, feeling braver, falling for you. Even though I have no idea what I'm doing, and I'm probably going to mess this up in spectacular ways. I don't think you will, Rosa said gently. You're one of the smartest people I know. You'll figure it out. Being smart at law doesn't translate to being smart at relationships. Trust me, my divorce is proof of that. They talked about safer things for a while. Rosa's son's upcoming school play, Margaret's upcoming case about voting rights, their shared love of old movies and dislike of horror films. The conversation flowed more easily than it had in the bathroom or the courthouse, and Margaret found herself relaxing. But then Rosa asked, how did dinner with Emily go? Margaret told her about the evening, including Emily's question about whether Margaret was seeing someone. I almost told her, Margaret admitted. About you, about being gay. But I couldn't. I got scared. That's okay, Rosa said. Coming out is a process. It happens at different speeds for everyone. Have you thought more about telling Miguel? Rosa's expression became troubled all the time. I keep thinking I should just do it, rip off the Band-Aid. But then I imagine all the ways it could go wrong, and I freeze. What's the worst that could happen? Margaret asked. He could hate me, could be ashamed of me, could choose to live with his father full-time. Rosa's voice cracked. I could lose my son. Margaret reached across the table and took Rosa's hand. It was the first time they'd held hands deliberately, and the touch sent warmth through her entire body. If he loves you, and I'm sure he does, he'll come around. Maybe not immediately, but eventually. Is that what you tell yourself about Emily? Yes, Margaret admitted. And I have to believe it's true. They sat there, hands clasped, until Rosa said quietly, This feels like more than coffee between friends. It does, Margaret agreed, her heart pounding. What is this? Rosa asked. Margaret took a deep breath. I think this is me, at 42 years old, on my first real date with a woman, and I think it's you, being incredibly patient with my awkwardness. And I think it's both of us trying to be brave enough to see where this goes. I like that definition, Rosa said softly. Me too. They stayed at the cafe for 3 hours, ordering more coffee, and then sharing a piece of chocolate cake, talking about everything and nothing. When they finally left, the rain had stopped, and the city streets glistened under the streetlights. Can I walk you to the subway? Margaret asked. I'd like that. They walked slowly through the village, not touching but staying close. When they reached the subway entrance, Rosa turned to face Margaret. I had a really good time today. So did I, Margaret said. Can we do this again? I'd like that. Next Sunday? Next Sunday. Margaret hesitated, then added, Rosa, would it be okay if you what? If I kissed you? Margaret's voice was barely a whisper. Rosa's eyes widened, then softened. I would really like that. They were standing on a relatively quiet corner, but it was still New York City, still public. Margaret's entire life had been about maintaining appearances, about never being seen doing anything that could be questioned. But Rosa was looking at her with such warmth, such hope, and Margaret was so tired of hiding. She leaned in slowly, giving Rosa time to pull away if she wanted. But Rosa didn't pull away. Instead, she met Margaret halfway, and their lips touched in the gentlest, briefest kiss. It lasted maybe 3 seconds. But in those 3 seconds, Margaret's entire world shifted. When they pulled apart, Rosa was smiling. That was nice. It was my first kiss with a woman, Margaret said, feeling dazed. How was it? Perfect, Margaret breathed. Absolutely perfect. Rosa laughed, that warm, beautiful laugh. Good, because I'd like to do it again sometime. Me too. They parted with promises to text, and Margaret walked home in a daze. She'd done it. She'd gone on a date with a woman. She'd kissed a woman. She'd taken real, concrete steps toward being herself. And instead of the catastrophe she'd always feared, it had been wonderful. That night, lying in bed, Margaret texted Rosa, Thank you for today, for being patient with me, for making this less scary. Rosa's response came quickly. Thank you for being brave enough to try. Sweet dreams, Margaret. Margaret fell asleep smiling for the first time in years. The next few weeks were like living in two different worlds. In one world, Margaret was Judge Thompson, composed, professional, making crucial decisions on cases that affected thousands of lives. In the other world, she was Margaret, a woman slowly discovering herself, falling in love for the first time in her life in a way that felt real and true. She and Rosa continued their Tuesday and Thursday meetings at the courthouse, but they also added Sunday afternoon dates. They were always careful, always discreet, choosing quiet places where they were unlikely to be recognized. Margaret felt the constant low-level anxiety of hiding, but she also felt more alive than she had in decades. On a cold Tuesday in early December, everything came crashing down. Margaret was in her chambers when her clerk knocked urgently. Judge Thompson, you need to see this. He handed her his phone, open to a legal gossip blog. The headline made Margaret's blood run cold. Federal Judge Margaret Thompson spotted an intimate encounter with courthouse employee. Below was a photo, grainy, taken from a distance, but unmistakably her and Rosa, kissing outside the subway entrance. Someone had been there that Sunday evening. Someone had taken a picture. The article was vague but suggestive, questioning whether there was inappropriate conduct between a federal judge and a courthouse employee, hinting at possible ethics violations. Margaret felt like she was going to be sick. I don't know where this came from, her clerk said, clearly uncomfortable. But Judge, you should probably call someone. A lawyer, maybe, just in case. Margaret nodded numbly, dismissing him. When he left, she closed her office door and called Rosa immediately. Rosa, we have a problem. Rosa had seen the article too. Her voice was shaking. Margaret, I'm so sorry. I didn't think anyone saw us. It's not your fault, Margaret said, though her mind was racing through the implications. But we need to talk. Can you come to my office? Now? During work hours? I don't think it matters anymore what people think about us meeting. 20 minutes later, Rosa sat in Margaret's office, her eyes red from crying. This is going to ruin your career. And I'm going to lose my job. We don't know that yet, Margaret said, trying to sound calmer than she felt. The article doesn't actually say anything concrete. It's all speculation. But the picture shows two adults kissing, which isn't illegal. Margaret paced her office. The ethics question is whether there's a conflict of interest or abuse of power. But Rosa, you don't work for me. You work for the building maintenance company. There's no direct reporting relationship, but people will still think it's wrong, Rosa said miserably. They'll say you took advantage of me, that I'm trying to use you for something. And Miguel, her voice broke. He's going to see this. He's going to find out this way, from some gossip article, instead of from me. Margaret stopped pacing and knelt in front of Rosa's chair. I'm so sorry. This is my fault. I should have been more careful. It's not your fault either. We were just being ourselves. For 5 minutes, we were just two people who care about each other. Rosa wiped her tears. But the world doesn't let people like us just be ourselves, does it? Before Margaret could respond, her phone rang. It was the chief judge of their circuit. Judge Thompson, we need to talk about this article. The conversation was brief and professional. The chief judge wanted to meet with Margaret tomorrow morning to discuss whether there were any ethics violations. He assured her this was standard procedure, not an accusation. But Margaret heard the concern in his voice. When she hung up, Rosa stood. I should go. I don't want to make this worse for you. Rosa, wait. No, Margaret. You need to protect yourself. I'm just a janitor. You're a federal judge. You have so much more to lose. You're not just anything, Margaret said firmly, echoing words she'd said before. And I'm not going to pretend this didn't happen or throw you aside to save myself. But your career matters less than my integrity, less than treating you with the respect and care you deserve. Margaret took Rosa's hands. We're going to get through this, together. Rosa looked at her with tear-filled eyes. How can you be so sure? Because I'm done hiding. I'm done pretending. and I'm done being ashamed of who I am." Margaret felt a clarity she'd never experienced before. This article, as terrible as the timing is, just forced us to face something we were going to have to face eventually. What's that? Whether we're willing to live authentically, even when it's hard, even when it costs us something. Rosa pulled Margaret into a hug, and they stood there in the office, holding each other, drawing strength from their connection. "I need to tell Miguel," Rosa said quietly, "before he hears it from someone else or sees something online." "Do you want me to come with you?" Rosa pulled back, surprised. "You would do that?" "If you want me there, yes. This affects both of us. We should face it together." That evening, Margaret and Rosa sat in Rosa's modest apartment in Queens, waiting for Miguel to come home from basketball practice. The apartment was small but homey, filled with photographs and the smell of Rosa's cooking. When Miguel walked in, he immediately sensed the tension. "Mom, what's going on? Is everything okay?" "Sit down, mijo," Rosa said gently. "There's something I need to tell you, something I should have told you a long time ago." Miguel sat on the couch, looking between his mother and Margaret with confusion. "Who's this?" "This is Margaret. She's important to me." Rosa took a deep breath. "Miguel, I'm gay. I've known for a long time, but I was scared to tell you. Scared you would hate me or be ashamed of me." Miguel stared at his mother. The silence stretched out, painful and heavy. Finally, he said, "Is that why you and Dad got divorced?" "Part of the reason, yes. I didn't realize it fully at the time, but looking back, I was never happy in that marriage because I wasn't being true to myself." "How long have you known?" Miguel's voice was tight. "That I'm gay?" "Since I was younger than you, but I only accepted it about 5 years ago." 5 years? Miguel's voice rose. "You've been lying to me for 5 years." "Not lying," Rosa said, tears streaming down her face. "Just scared. Scared of losing you." Miguel stood up, agitated. "I need some air. I need to think." "Miguel, please." But he was already heading toward his room, the door closing firmly behind him. Rosa collapsed into sobs. Margaret sat beside her, holding her as she cried. "He hates me," Rosa choked out. "I knew this would happen." "He doesn't hate you," Margaret said firmly. "He's processing. This is a lot of information suddenly. Give him time." They sat there for over an hour, Rosa crying and Margaret just being present, offering comfort. Finally, Miguel's door opened. He came out, his eyes red, and sat down across from them. "Mom," he said, his voice rough, "I don't hate you. I feel like I don't know you, like you've been keeping this huge part of yourself hidden from me." "I know," Rosa whispered. "I'm so sorry. And there's an article online. Kids at school were talking about it, about you and Judge Thompson." He looked at Margaret. "That's you?" "Yes," Margaret said quietly. "Your mother and I care about each other very much. The article was intrusive and hurtful, but the basic fact is true. We're together." Miguel processed this. "Are you happy, Mom? With her?" Rosa looked at Margaret, then back at her son. "Yes. Happier than I've been in a very long time." "Then I guess that's what matters." Miguel's voice was still uncertain, but there was acceptance beginning to show. "I just wish you'd trusted me enough to tell me before the whole world found out." "You're right. I should have. Can you forgive me?" Miguel nodded slowly. "It's going to take me some time to adjust, and I probably need to talk to someone about this. But Mom, you're still my mom. That doesn't change." Rosa stood and hugged her son fiercely. "Te amo, mijo. Te amo tanto." "I love you too, Mom." When Margaret left an hour later, giving Rosa and Miguel time alone, she felt emotionally wrung out, but also strangely hopeful. It hadn't been easy, but they'd gotten through the hardest part. The next morning, Margaret met with the chief judge. She was completely honest about her relationship with Rosa, explaining the timeline, the nature of Rosa's employment, and the lack of any direct professional relationship that would create a conflict of interest. The chief judge listened carefully. "Judge Thompson, I appreciate your honesty. From what you've described, I don't see any ethics violation. However, I'm sure you understand that the optics are difficult." "I do understand," Margaret said. and I'm prepared to face whatever scrutiny comes from this, but I'm not going to apologize for being in a relationship with someone I care about. I'm not asking you to apologize. I'm simply advising you to be prepared for increased attention." He paused. "For what it's worth, Margaret, I've known you for over a decade. You're one of the finest judges I've had the privilege of working with. Don't let this derail you." "Thank you, sir." Over the next few days, the storm raged. More articles appeared, though they were mostly speculation. Margaret received supportive calls from some colleagues and awkward silences from others. But she also received an unexpected call from Emily. "Mom, I saw the article," Emily said. "About you and someone named Rosa Morales." Margaret's heart sank. "Emily, I can explain." "You don't need to explain," Emily interrupted. "I just wish you'd told me yourself. When I asked if you were seeing someone, I assumed it was a man. I made it hard for you to tell me the truth. It's not your fault, sweetheart. Is she the reason you seem lighter, happier?" "Yes." "Then I'm happy for you, Mom. I really am. I want to meet her sometime, if that's okay." Margaret felt tears pricking her eyes. "That would be wonderful. And Mom? I'm sorry I've been distant. I was angry about the divorce and took it out on you. But seeing you finally being honest about who you are, it makes me understand things better." "I love you, Emily. I love you too, Mom." 2 weeks later, as December snow began to fall on New York City, Margaret and Rosa sat on a bench in Central Park, watching ice skaters glide across Woolman Rink. The initial media storm had died down. The ethics review had found no violations. Rosa was still working at the courthouse, though she'd requested a transfer to a different floor to avoid any appearance of impropriety. Miguel was seeing a therapist and slowly coming to terms with his mother's sexuality. "Are you okay?" Rosa asked, her gloved hand finding Margaret's. "I'm better than okay," Margaret said. "I'm free. For the first time in my life, I'm actually free. Even with all the stress and the articles and the scrutiny, even with all of that. Because I'm not hiding anymore. I'm not crying alone in bathrooms. I'm not pretending to be someone I'm not." She turned to Rosa. "I'm just Margaret, and I'm with someone I love." Rosa's eyes widened. "You love me?" "I do. I know it's fast, and I know we're still figuring things out, but yes. I love you." Rosa kissed her, right there in Central Park where anyone could see. "I love you too." As they sat there, watching the snow fall and the skaters twirl, Margaret thought about that first night in the courthouse bathroom, when she'd been at her lowest point, crying alone, certain she would have to hide forever. And then Rosa had walked in and said 4 words that changed everything. "I know too. Sometimes the person who sees you at your most vulnerable is exactly who you need to become whole. Sometimes love finds you in the most unexpected places, even in a courthouse bathroom at midnight. And sometimes the courage to be yourself comes not from being fearless, but from finding someone who makes you feel less alone in your fear." Margaret squeezed Rosa's hand, looking toward a future that finally felt like her own. Thank you for following Margaret and Rosa's journey. If this story touched your heart, subscribe to our channel for more stories of courage, love, and finding yourself. Sometimes the bravest thing we can do is simply be honest about who we are.